The champagne glass tilted. The golden liquid caught the cabin lights for just a second before it splashed across the woman's lap, soaking through her grey cotton sweatpants. Laughter rippled through first class. Phone cameras pointed at seat 2A. The flight attendant's hand covered her mouth, but her eyes were smiling. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice dripping with something that wasn't quite apology. "These things happen when people aren't used to first-class service." The woman in 2A didn't flinch. She looked down at the spreading stain, then back up at the flight attendant. Her face showed nothing. No anger, no embarrassment, just a calm that seemed to unsettle everyone watching. But nobody knew who really sat in that champagne-soaked seat. Nobody knew what she actually did for a living. And in 24 hours, that airline would issue a statement that would send shockwaves through the entire aviation industry. But nobody knew who really was Diana Hutchinson, and that day everything would change. If you believe that justice should reach those who discriminate based on appearances, and that hidden power makes the best plot twist, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get to what really happened that day. It was early September 2022. Flight 2847 from Miami to New York's JFK was running 15 minutes late for boarding. Gate C-17 at Miami International Airport buzzed with the usual pre-flight chaos. Business travelers tapped on laptops. Families corralled children. The usual Friday afternoon crowd. Diana Hutchinson stood near the back of the priority boarding line, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. She wore a plain grey hoodie, sweatpants, and white sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No jewelry except a basic watch. No designer luggage. Just the tote bag and a small black backpack. She looked like someone who'd grabbed a last-minute ticket in coach and gotten lucky with an upgrade. The gate agent barely glanced at her boarding pass before waving her through. The jetway smelled like recycled air and jet fuel. Diana walked slowly in no particular hurry. She'd taken this flight dozens of times, though nobody on this crew would know that. Flight attendant Jessica Martinez stood at the aircraft door, her smile bright and practiced. She greeted the first-class passengers with the rehearsed warmth that comes from 10 years of service. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Richardson. Good to see you again, Ms. Chen." "Right this way, sir." Then Diana stepped through the door. Jessica's smile flickered, just for a second. Her eyes traveled from Diana's sneakers up to her hoodie, taking inventory. The pause was barely noticeable, but it was there. "Boarding pass, please," she said. "Not welcome aboard, not good afternoon, just the requirement." Diana handed it over without a word. Jessica scanned it, frowned slightly, scanned it again. "This says 2A. "That's correct," Diana said quietly. "First class, seat 2A. Jessica's tone suggested she was clarifying for Diana's benefit, as though the passenger might not understand the difference between cabin classes. "Yes." Jessica looked past Diana, as if expecting someone else to appear. Someone who looked like they belonged in first class. Someone in business attire, or at least designer athleisure. When no one materialized, she forced a tight smile. "Right. This way." The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 held 16 seats in a 2-2 configuration. Most were already filled, passengers in pressed shirts and tailored jackets, women with Hermes bags tucked under the seats in front of them, the quiet rustle of the Wall Street Journal, the soft glow of MacBook Pros. Diana moved past row 1. The man in 1B glanced up from his phone, took in her appearance, then looked away with barely concealed judgment. She could feel the weight of assessment following her down the aisle. Seat 2A was the window seat on the left side. The aisle seat 2B was empty. Diana placed her tote in the overhead bin and settled into her seat. The leather was soft, the legroom generous. She pulled out her phone, opened her email, and began scrolling through messages. Just another passenger getting comfortable before takeoff, or so it seemed. Jessica Martinez watched from the galley, whispering to her colleague, senior flight attendant Robert Chen. "Did you see 2A?" she murmured, loading champagne glasses onto a tray. Robert glanced over. His expression matched Jessica's. "How did she afford first class?" he said, not bothering to lower his voice much. "Those seats are $4,200. Probably used miles from a credit card," Jessica said. "They let anyone into first class these days." A passenger in row 1, a silver-haired woman in a cream-colored blazer, turned slightly. She'd heard the exchange. Her name was Patricia Brennan, a corporate lawyer from Boston. She looked back at Diana with renewed interest, the kind of look that seeks to confirm a narrative already forming. The boarding continued. More passengers filtered in. The man who eventually took seat 2B was named Marcus Webb, a financial consultant who traveled every week for work. He threw his jacket into the overhead bin and dropped into his seat with the casual entitlement of someone who lived in first class. He glanced at Diana, did a double take, then pulled out his phone. Jessica returned with the pre-departure beverage service, champagne or orange juice. She worked her way down the aisle with practiced efficiency, her smile generous for each passenger. "Champagne, Mr. Webb?" she asked warmly. "Please," Marcus said, not looking up from his phone. Then she turned to Diana. The smile was gone. "Would you like something to drink?" The words were correct, but the tone was flat, transactional. "Champagne, please," Diana said softly. Jessica poured, but her movements were quick, careless. The glass was only 2/3 full, not the generous pour she'd given the others. She set it down on Diana's tray table without making eye contact. "Here you go." "Thank you," Diana said. Jessica was already moving on. "Champagne, Mrs. Brennan?" The lawyer in row 1 accepted her glass with a knowing look. She leaned across the aisle to her husband. "Did you see how she's dressed?" Patricia whispered, but not quietly enough. "In first class. It's inappropriate." Her husband, Richard, glanced back. Maybe she doesn't know better. She should have been stopped at the gate. 2 rows back in seat 4C, a younger woman named Amanda Price had her phone out. She was an influencer with 300,000 followers on Instagram. She'd noticed the whispers. She'd seen the contempt in Jessica's eyes, and she recognized good content when she saw it. She angled her phone camera toward row 2 and hit record. The cabin door closed. The captain's voice came through the speakers with the standard announcement. Departure time, flight duration, weather in New York. The flight attendants began the safety demonstration. Diana sipped her champagne slowly, watching the flight attendants go through the motions of pointing out exit rows and oxygen masks. Her face remained neutral, unreadable. She could feel the stares, the judgment. She was used to it, but today felt different. There was an edge to the hostility that went beyond the usual microaggressions. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines spooled up. Miami fell away beneath them as the 777 climbed into the clear afternoon sky. 20 minutes into the flight, Jessica emerged from the galley with a serving cart. The lunch service in first class was always elaborate. Today's menu included seared salmon with asparagus, herb-crusted chicken, or a vegetarian pasta, warm bread rolls, side salads, dessert. She worked her way down the aisle, taking orders with that professional cheerfulness that masks exhaustion. When she reached row 2, she addressed Marcus first. "Sir, today we have salmon, chicken, or pasta. Which would you prefer?" "Salmon," Marcus said, scrolling through emails on his laptop. Jessica turned to Diana. The warmth vanished. "And for you?" "Not ma'am. Not, which would you prefer? Just the bare minimum." "The chicken, please," Diana said. Jessica made a note, but her expression suggested skepticism. As if someone dressed like Diana couldn't possibly appreciate herb-crusted chicken. She moved on without another word. Patricia Brennan leaned toward her husband again. "I'm going to say something," she whispered. "This is unacceptable." "Patricia, don't!" But she was already pressing the call button. Jessica returned within seconds, her smile reflexive. "Yes, Mrs. Brennan. How can I help you?" Patricia lowered her voice, but not nearly enough. "I don't want to cause trouble," she began, in the tone of someone who absolutely did want to cause trouble, "but I'm concerned about the passenger in 2A. Jessica's eyes flicked to Diana. "Concerned? She doesn't seem to understand first-class etiquette," Patricia continued. "The way she's dressed, it makes the rest of us uncomfortable. I paid a lot of money for this seat and I expect a certain standard." Diana, in the row behind, could hear every word. She didn't turn around, didn't react. She simply continued looking out the window at the clouds below, her expression unchanged. Jessica bit her lip, clearly torn between customer service protocol and her own biases. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Brennan," she said carefully, "but if her boarding pass is valid, maybe you should double-check it," Patricia suggested. "These mistakes happen. She could be in the wrong seat. She might belong in economy." Robert Chen had emerged from the galley, attracted by the conversation. He joined Jessica, his expression serious. "Is there a problem?" "Mrs. Brennan has concerns about the passenger in 2A," Jessica explained. Robert looked at Diana. His judgment was instant and visible. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a senior crew member. He approached Diana's seat. She was still looking out the window. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me, miss." Diana turned slowly. "Yes?" "I need to verify your boarding pass," Robert said. "Not a request, a demand." "I already showed it at the gate, and when I boarded," Diana said calmly. "I need to see it again." His tone left no room for discussion. Diana reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone. She opened her mobile boarding pass and held it up. Robert leaned in, studying it with exaggerated care. His eyes narrowed. "This says Diana Hutchinson, is that you?" "Yes." "Can I see an ID?" Now other passengers were watching. The cabin had gone quiet except for the steady hum of the engines. Marcus, in seat 2B, had stopped working and was openly staring. Amanda, 4 rows back, adjusted her phone angle to capture everything. "Is there a reason you're asking for my ID?" Diana asked. Still calm, still quiet, but there was something in her voice now, a firmness that hadn't been there before. "We have the right to verify passenger identity for security purposes," Robert said. "You didn't ask anyone else for ID. I'm asking you." The silence stretched. Diana could refuse, she could make a scene, she could pull rank right now and end this humiliation instantly, but she didn't. Instead, she reached into her backpack and pulled out her driver's license. She handed it to Robert without a word. He studied it, compared the photo to her face. The name matched the boarding pass. Everything was in order. He had no legitimate reason to continue this interrogation, but he wasn't done. "How did you afford this seat?" he asked. The question landed like a slap. "Excuse me?" Diana said. "First-class tickets are expensive," Robert said. "I'm just curious how you managed it." Marcus Webb let out a short laugh. He immediately tried to cover it with a cough, but it was too late. The disdain was clear. Patricia Brennan was nodding in approval. "That's a fair question," she said from row 1. Diana looked at Robert, then at Jessica, who stood behind him, then at the faces staring at her from every direction. She could feel the weight of their assumptions, their prejudices, the collective belief that someone who looked like her, dressed like her, didn't belong in this space. "You saw how calm she remained? Could you have maintained that dignity? Leave your answer in the comments." Jessica returned with the meal cart. She served Marcus his salmon with a warm smile. The plate was perfectly arranged. The presentation was careful. Then she turned to Diana. The chicken appeared, but the presentation was noticeably different. The food was slightly off-center on the plate. The asparagus looked like it had been thrown on as an afterthought. Jessica set it down on Diana's tray table with a hard thunk that rattled the silverware. "Enjoy your meal," Jessica said, the words empty of meaning. Diana looked down at the plate, said nothing. As Jessica turned to move the cart forward, her hip bumped the side of Diana's tray table. The champagne glass that had been sitting there, still half full, tipped over. The golden liquid poured across the tray, running onto Diana's lap for the second time. It soaked into the same sweatpants that had already been christened during pre-departure service. "Oh!" Jessica's hand flew to her mouth, but her eyes betrayed her. There was no surprise there, this had been deliberate. "I'm so clumsy today, I'm so sorry." Laughter erupted from multiple seats. Marcus was grinning openly. Patricia was shaking her head with an expression that said, "I told you so." Amanda's phone was still recording, capturing every moment. Robert appeared with napkins. But instead of helping Diana clean up, he stood there with them in his hand, as if waiting for her to ask, as if making her beg for basic assistance. Diana looked down at her lap. The champagne had spread across her sweatpants in a dark stain. She looked at the napkins in Robert's hand, then at Jessica's barely suppressed smile, then at the faces around her, some shocked, most amused, and she did something that shocked them all. Nothing. She didn't shout, didn't demand to see a supervisor, didn't threaten to file a complaint. She simply reached across to the unused napkin on her tray table and began dabbing at the stain with slow, methodical movements. Her face showed no emotion, no anger, no humiliation, just a blank calm that was somehow more unsettling than any outburst would have been. "Would you like me to get you some club soda?" Jessica offered, her voice dripping with false concern. "No, thank you," Diana said softly. The meal service continued. Around her, passengers ate and chatted and tried not to stare, but she felt every sideways glance, heard every whispered comment. The man in 3B muttered to his wife about, People who don't know how to behave in first class. The woman in 4A told her companion that some people just don't have class, no matter where they sit. Diana ate her chicken slowly, methodically. She didn't rush, didn't show any sign that she wanted to escape the situation. When she finished, she placed her knife and fork at the 4 o'clock position on her plate, the proper signal that she was done. Jessica swept by to collect the tray without making eye contact. The flight continued. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. Some passengers reclined their seats and closed their eyes. Others worked on laptops. The hum of conversation fell to a murmur. Diana pulled out her tablet from her backpack. She opened a document and began reading. The screen showed dense paragraphs of legal text: aviation regulations, FAA compliance requirements, airline safety protocols. She scrolled slowly, occasionally making notes with a stylus. Marcus, in the seat beside her, glanced over. He couldn't help it. The document on her screen was clearly official, technical, not the kind of thing a random passenger would be reading. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He looked at Diana again, really looked at her as if trying to reconcile what he'd assumed with what he was seeing, but he said nothing. 2 hours into the flight, the plane hit turbulence. Not severe, but enough that the seatbelt sign chimed on. Jessica's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Diana was already buckled in. She continued reading her document, unfazed by the bumps. Jessica walked down the aisle, checking that everyone was secured. When she reached row 2, she stopped. "Miss," she said sharply to Diana. "Your seatbelt." Diana looked up. "It's fastened. I need to see it." Diana lifted her hoodie slightly to reveal the seatbelt across her lap, clearly buckled. Jessica stared at it, clearly hoping to find fault. Finding none, she moved on without apology. Patricia Brennan watched the exchange and shook her head. "Unbelievable," she muttered to her husband. "They have to treat her like a child." The turbulence passed. The seatbelt sign turned off. The flight settled back into routine, but something had shifted in the cabin. The initial amusement at Diana's expense had faded. Now there was something else, a discomfort, because her silence wasn't the silence of someone humiliated. It was the silence of someone who didn't need to explain themselves, someone who didn't feel the need to defend or justify. And that silence was starting to feel threatening. 90 minutes before landing, Robert emerged from the galley with a trash bag, collecting garbage from passengers. When he reached Diana's row, he stopped. "Trash," he said, not asking, demanding. Diana handed him an empty water bottle. Robert took it but then paused. He looked down at Diana's backpack, which was tucked under the seat in front of her. "That needs to go in the overhead bin," he said. "It's small enough to be a personal item," Diana replied evenly. "It's too large. Put it in the overhead." The airline's policy states that personal items up to 18 inches can remain under the seat. This bag is 16 inches. Robert's jaw tightened. Nobody corrected him, certainly not passengers. "I'm telling you it needs to go up." Diana looked at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she reached down, pulled out the backpack, and stood to place it in the overhead bin. As she did, Robert deliberately moved his trash bag so that it brushed against her, forcing her to press back against her seat to avoid contact. It was a small thing, petty, but it was aggressive, physical, and everyone saw it. When Diana sat back down, Marcus looked away quickly. The smirk had disappeared from his face entirely. Amanda, still recording intermittently from row 4, caught the entire interaction. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers. "Flight attendants, prepare for landing." The cabin stirred to life. Passengers straightened their seats, put away electronics, opened window shades. The New York skyline appeared in the distance, glittering in the late afternoon sun. Jessica and Robert moved through the cabin one final time, checking that everyone was ready for arrival. When they passed Diana's row, neither said a word to her. They didn't need to. Their contempt had been communicated thoroughly enough over the past 4 hours. The wheels touched down at JFK with a soft bump. The engines reversed, the plane slowed, and finally they turned off the runway toward the gate. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers immediately stood, reaching for overhead bins, eager to disembark. Diana remained seated. She didn't rush, didn't stand. She simply waited as the aisle filled with people pulling down bags and shuffling toward the exit. Marcus grabbed his jacket from the overhead and glanced down at her one more time. There was something in his expression now. Not quite concern, but definitely uncertainty. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then thought better of it, and joined the line of passengers moving toward the door. Finally, when most of first class had emptied, Diana stood. She pulled down her tote bag and her backpack. She slung both over her shoulder. Then she walked slowly toward the exit, her sneakers making soft sounds on the cabin floor. Jessica and Robert stood at the door, thanking passengers as they left. "Thank you for flying with us. Have a great day. Safe travels." The same script repeated over and over. Diana reached the door. Jessica's smile froze. Robert's expression hardened. Diana stopped. She looked at both of them, and then she spoke, her voice quiet, but absolutely clear. "I want both of your full names and employee ID numbers." Jessica blinked. What? "Your names and ID numbers," Diana repeated. "Now." Robert stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "You don't get to demand—" "Jessica Martinez," Diana said, reading the name tag on Jessica's uniform. "And you are?" "Robert Chen," he said through clenched teeth. "Is there a problem?" Diana didn't answer. She simply pulled out her phone, opened the camera, and took a clear photograph of both of them standing at the aircraft door. Neither moved to stop her. They were too stunned. Then she turned and walked off the plane without another word. Jessica and Robert stood in the doorway, watching her disappear into the jetway. "What the hell was that about?" Jessica whispered. "Probably going to file some pointless complaint," Robert said dismissively. "They always threaten that. Nothing ever happens. Should we be worried?" "About her?" Robert laughed. "Please, she's nobody." Behind them, Amanda Price was the last to leave first class. She paused at the door. "You guys really messed up," she said quietly. "Excuse me?" Jessica said. "That woman. I don't know who she is, but I know what you did to her. And I recorded all of it." Amanda held up her phone. "This is going on my Instagram tonight. 300,000 followers. Hope your supervisors are understanding, people." She walked off before either of them could respond. Jessica's face went pale. "She recorded it?" Robert's confidence wavered. "So what? We were just doing our job, maintaining standards. We poured champagne on her twice. It was an accident. Robert, you bumped into her with the trash bag on purpose." "I saw you." The cabin was empty now. The cleaning crew would be boarding soon. Jessica and Robert stood in the galley, the reality of their situation starting to penetrate. "What if she really does complain?" Jessica said. "Then we explain what happened," Robert said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "We were concerned about security, about maintaining the first-class experience for our premium passengers. That's our job. Is it our job to humiliate people?" Robert didn't answer. Nobody understood the significance of what they'd just witnessed. The jetway at JFK was crowded with deplaning passengers. Diana moved through the crowd without hurry, her wet sweatpants sticking uncomfortably to her legs. She could hear fragments of conversation around her, passengers from her flight talking about her. "Did you see that woman in first class? The one they kept hassling? She just sat there and took it. Didn't say anything. I would have lost it." Diana kept walking, through the gate area, past the shops and restaurants of Terminal 4, down the escalator to baggage claim. She had no checked luggage, but she stopped at the Delta customer service desk. The agent behind the counter was a young man named Kevin, barely out of college. He looked up with a practiced smile. "How can I help you today?" "I need to file a formal complaint," Diana said. Kevin's smile dimmed slightly. Complaints were tedious, they took time, but he pulled up the form on his computer. "Certainly. Can I have your name and flight number?" "Diana Hutchinson, flight 2847 from Miami," Kevin typed. "And what is the nature of your complaint?" "Discrimination and harassment by flight crew members, specifically flight attendants Jessica Martinez and Robert Chen." Kevin looked up sharply. "Those were serious allegations. Can you describe what happened?" Diana did. She kept her voice calm and factual. She described the champagne incidents, the demands for ID, the questions about how she could afford her seat, the physical contact with the trash bag, the pattern of different treatment compared to other passengers. Kevin's eyes widened as she spoke. He typed quickly, trying to capture everything. "And you said other passengers witnessed this?" "Yes. At least one was recording video." "Do you have their contact information?" "No, but the video will likely be posted on social media." "The woman said she had 300,000 Instagram followers." Kevin stopped typing. His face had gone very serious. "Ms. Hutchinson, I want you to know that Delta takes these allegations extremely seriously. This will be escalated to our customer care team immediately." "Good," Diana said. "I also want to ensure that the aircraft's security footage is preserved. There are cameras in the cabin. I'll make a note of that." "One more thing," Diana said. She pulled a business card from her wallet and placed it on the counter. Kevin picked it up, read it. His face went white. The card was simple. Black text on white background. It read, "Diana Hutchinson, Executive Director, Federal Aviation Administration." Kevin looked from the card to Diana's face. Her wet sweatpants, her plain hoodie, her casual sneakers. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was one of the most powerful people in American aviation. Someone who could ground aircraft, revoke licenses, and launch federal investigations with a single phone call. "Oh my God," Kevin whispered. "I'd appreciate it if this complaint received appropriate attention," Diana said calmly. Yes, ma'am, absolutely." Kevin's hands were shaking as he typed, "I'm flagging this as priority 1. Our executive customer service team will contact you within 24 hours. Thank you." Diana took her business card back and walked away. Kevin sat frozen at his desk, staring at his computer screen. Then he grabbed his phone and called his supervisor. "Sir, we have a situation, a major situation." Diana left the airport and climbed into a waiting car. Her driver, a woman named Sarah who'd worked for her for 3 years, took one look at the stains on her boss's clothing and raised an eyebrow. "Rough flight?" "You could say that," Diana said, settling into the back seat. "Want to talk about it?" "Not yet." They drove in silence toward Diana's apartment in Manhattan. The city scrolled past the windows. Friday evening traffic clogged the Van Wyck Expressway. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Diana pulled out her phone. She had 47 unread emails. Most were work-related, FAA business, regulatory issues, safety reports. She scrolled through them mechanically, her mind elsewhere. One email caught her attention. It was from her chief of staff, Margaret Torres. The subject line read, "Media Inquiry, Delta Airlines Incident." Diana opened it. The email had been sent 30 minutes ago. "Diana, just got a weird call from a reporter at CNN asking if we had any comment on an incident involving you on a Delta flight today. I told them I had no information and would check with you. What's going on?" "Yes." Diana smiled slightly. Amanda's video was already making waves. She typed a quick response. "We'll explain Monday. Nothing urgent. D." By the time Diana's car pulled up to her building on the Upper West Side, the video had been posted. Amanda Price's Instagram account, Amanda Travels, had uploaded a compilation. The footage was edited but damning. It showed Jessica pouring champagne on Diana's lap, Robert demanding her ID while other passengers watched, the confrontation about the backpack, the deliberate bump with the trash bag. The caption read, "Just witnessed the most disgusting display of discrimination I've ever seen on a flight." Their Delta flight attendants repeatedly humiliated and harassed a black woman in first class for no reason, except she didn't look like she belonged. The way she handled this with grace and dignity while they tried to break her spirit was heartbreaking and inspiring. This is unacceptable. Do better, Delta. Do. Tie to Delta discrimination. Chung flying while black. Chung to traveling while black. The video had been posted 45 minutes ago. It already had 80,000 views. The comments were flooding in, hundreds per minute. "This is absolutely disgusting. I'm never flying Delta again." That woman showed incredible restraint. Those flight attendants should be fired immediately. Is there a way to find out who she is? I want to support her. Diana didn't have Instagram. She wouldn't see the video until much later, but across the country, millions of people were watching, sharing, getting angrier by the minute. In Atlanta, in Delta's headquarters, the crisis management team was already assembling. Diana spent Friday evening in her apartment. She ordered Thai food, took a long shower to wash away the champagne that had dried sticky on her skin, changed into clean clothes. Then she sat on her couch with a glass of wine and finally allowed herself to process what had happened. She'd experienced discrimination before, plenty of times. She was a black woman who'd risen to one of the most powerful positions in federal aviation oversight. She knew what it felt like to be underestimated, dismissed, treated as less than. But today had been different. The cruelty had been so casual, so performative. Jessica and Robert had humiliated her not just because of their own prejudices, but because they knew they had an audience, because other passengers had encouraged it, because in that first-class cabin, surrounded by people who looked and dressed a certain way, they'd felt safe to be their worst selves, and they had no idea who they'd targeted. Diana thought about letting it go. She could. Her formal complaint had been filed. Delta would likely offer her some miles, a voucher, maybe a written apology. The flight attendants might get a reprimand, maybe a brief suspension. Then everything would return to normal. But that wasn't justice. Justice required consequences. Real consequences. The kind that made people understand that actions have weight. Diana pulled out her laptop. She opened her secure FAA email system and began typing. Saturday morning arrived sunny and clear in Atlanta. Delta's headquarters building stood gleaming in the early light, but inside there was no peace. The video had exploded overnight. By Saturday morning, it had been viewed 12 million times across Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. Major news outlets were picking it up. CNN, NBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, all running stories about discrimination on Delta Flight 2847. The airline's customer service lines were overwhelmed, thousands of calls from angry customers, demands for statements, threats of boycotts. Edward Morrison, Delta's chief operating officer, sat in an emergency meeting with his executive team. They'd been there since 6 a.m. "Tell me we've identified the passenger," Edward said. His head of customer experience, a woman named Linda Freeman, pulled up a file on the conference room screen. "We have. Her name is Diana Hutchinson. The flight attendant's reports describe her as a disruptive passenger who was inappropriately dressed for first class and became confrontational." "That's not what the video shows," Edward said flatly. "The crew maintains that the champagne spills were accidental. They say they were following protocol by requesting ID verification." "Did they request ID from any other passenger?" Linda hesitated. "No." "Then it wasn't protocol. It was profiling." Edward rubbed his temples. "Have we reached out to Ms. Hutchinson?" "We've tried. She hasn't responded to our calls or emails." "Try harder." "I want a statement ready by noon apologizing for the incident and announcing an immediate investigation." "Sir," Linda said carefully, "there's something else." "What?" "Ms. Hutchinson left a business card with our JFK customer service desk. Our agent photographed it and sent it to his supervisor." Linda pulled up an image on the screen. The room went silent. Edward stared at the business card. At the title, "Executive Director, Federal Aviation Administration." "No," he said quietly. No. "I'm afraid so," Linda said. "We just humiliated and harassed the person who has regulatory authority over our entire operation." Edward's face had gone grey. "Get our legal team on the phone now and find out everything about what happened on that flight. Every detail, every witness, every piece of evidence." "Yes, sir." "And Linda, those flight attendants, Jessica Martinez and Robert Chen, they're suspended immediately, no pay, pending termination." "Already done, sir." But suspension wasn't going to be enough. Edward knew that. They'd just committed a spectacular act of institutional failure, and the person they'd failed was someone with the power to make their lives very, very difficult. Saturday afternoon, Diana received a call from an unknown Atlanta number. She let it go to voicemail, then another, and another. By evening, she'd received 17 calls from Delta executives. She listened to exactly one voicemail. It was from Edward Morrison himself. "Ms. Hutchinson, this is Edward Morrison, Chief Operating Officer of Delta Airlines. I'm calling to personally apologize for the unacceptable treatment you received on Flight 2847. We take these matters with the utmost seriousness. I would very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you directly. Please call me at your earliest convenience." Diana deleted the message without responding. She wasn't being petty. She simply understood that anything she said to Delta now could complicate what was coming next, because on Saturday morning, she'd sent an email to the FAA's Office of Security and Hazardous Materials Safety. The email detailed her experience and requested a comprehensive review of Delta's crew training protocols, particularly around bias, discrimination, and passenger interaction standards. She'd also forwarded the Instagram video to the FAA's Civil Rights Office, with a formal request that they investigate whether Delta was in compliance with Department of Transportation regulations regarding discrimination in air travel. By Saturday evening, those offices had opened preliminary investigations. And once an FAA investigation begins, it doesn't stop just because an airline apologizes. Sunday morning, the story reached critical mass. The Washington Post published a detailed article, FAA Chief Subjected to Racial Discrimination on Delta Flight. It included interviews with several passengers from the flight, including Patricia Brennan, who'd called for Diana to be removed from first class. "I'm horrified by my own behavior," Patricia told the reporter, her voice shaking. "I was caught up in this terrible groupthink. I saw someone who didn't look like what I expected, and I made assumptions. I participated in her humiliation. I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Marcus Webb, the passenger in seat 2B, also spoke to the press. "I laughed," he admitted. "When the champagne spilled on her lap, I laughed. I thought it was funny. I'm ashamed. I work in finance. I consider myself educated and progressive, but when I saw someone who looked different from me in first class, I immediately assumed she didn't belong. That says something terrible about me." The article quoted Diana's formal FAA complaint. It detailed the multiple investigations now underway, and it noted that Diana had not responded to any of Delta's attempts to contact her. By Sunday afternoon, Delta's stock had dropped 4%. Social media was calling for boycotts. Civil rights organizations were demanding federal intervention. And in a Manhattan apartment, Diana Hutchinson sat with her coffee and watched it all unfold, with the calm of someone who knew exactly what was happening. Monday morning arrived with the force of a hammer. Delta issued its official statement at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. The airline's CEO, Richard Lansing, appeared in a video message posted to the company's website and social media. "I want to address the incident that occurred on Delta Flight 2847 last Friday," Richard began. His face was grave. "What happened to Ms. Diana Hutchinson is inexcusable and does not represent the values of this airline. After a thorough review, we have terminated the employment of flight attendants Jessica Martinez and Robert Chen, effective immediately. We have also placed their direct supervisors on administrative leave pending further investigation into training protocols," he continued. "We have begun a comprehensive review of our crew training programs, with specific focus on unconscious bias, discrimination, and respectful customer service. We are implementing mandatory retraining for all flight crew members, which will be completed within the next 60 days. Additionally, we are establishing an independent review board to examine incidents of passenger complaints involving discrimination." The statement went on. Promises of change, commitments to do better, pledges to rebuild trust. But there was more. "We also want to acknowledge that Ms. Hutchinson serves as the Executive Director of the Federal Aviation Administration. While she was traveling in a personal capacity, we understand that the FAA has opened multiple investigations into this incident and our broader policies. We will cooperate fully with these investigations. We accept full responsibility for this failure and commit to earning back the public's trust." The video ended. The internet exploded. Jessica Martinez and Robert Chen learned of their termination via email at 8:15 a.m. Neither had been given a chance to tell their side. There would be no hearing, no appeal, just instant, permanent consequences. Jessica sat in her Tampa apartment, staring at the termination letter on her screen. 10 years with Delta. Gone. Her career in aviation was over. No airline would hire her after this, not with her name attached to the most viral discrimination incident in recent memory. She thought about Diana's face, the way she'd sat there so calmly while Jessica poured champagne on her lap. The silence that had seemed like weakness but had actually been power. Jessica had destroyed her own life, and she'd done it on camera. Robert was in Miami. His termination email came with an additional note. The union would not be supporting any grievance on his behalf. The video evidence was too clear. The public outrage too intense. He was radioactive. He thought about the moment he'd demanded Diana's ID, the way he'd asked how she could afford first class, the casual cruelty that had seemed so justified at the time. He'd judged someone based purely on appearance, and that judgment had cost him everything. But the consequences didn't stop with 2 fired flight attendants. On Monday afternoon, the FAA announced its findings from the preliminary investigation. Delta had failed to maintain adequate training standards for crew bias awareness. The airline would face a $2 million fine. Additionally, the FAA was requiring Delta to submit revised training protocols within 30 days. and would be conducting spot inspections of crew behavior on randomly selected flights for the next year. The airline stock dropped another 3%. Major corporate clients began reviewing their contracts with Delta. One Fortune 500 company announced it was moving its business travel account to United, citing concerns about Delta's corporate culture. The estimated financial impact, over $200 million in lost business, and it all traced back to one flight, one woman in sweatpants, one assumption that someone didn't belong. Tuesday morning, Diana returned to her office at FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Her staff greeted her with a mixture of sympathy and barely concealed awe. Margaret, her chief of staff, followed her into her office and closed the door. "You handled that perfectly," she said. "I handled it the only way I could," Diana replied, settling behind her desk. "I filed a legitimate complaint about legitimate discrimination. Everything that followed was the result of Delta's own failures. The internet thinks you're a hero. The internet thinks I got revenge. That's not what this was about. Wasn't it? At least a little?" Diana smiled slightly. "Maybe a little, but mostly it's about accountability. Those flight attendants didn't just humiliate me. They revealed a systemic problem in how airlines train their staff and handle bias. If this hadn't happened to someone with my position, nothing would have changed. That champagne would have dried, and everyone would have moved on. Instead, 2 people lost their jobs. 2 people lost their jobs because they engaged in discriminatory behavior, harassed a passenger, and created a hostile environment. I didn't fire them. Delta fired them, because they had to." Margaret nodded slowly. "The investigators want to brief you on the expanded review. This afternoon is fine, and you have about 100 interview requests. Decline them all. This isn't about me, but it was about her, and about every black woman who'd been told she didn't belong somewhere, every person who'd been judged by their appearance instead of their character, every individual who'd been humiliated because someone else felt entitled to cruelty. Diana had simply been the one with the power to make the consequences real." 3 weeks after the incident, Amanda Price posted a follow-up video. She'd received a message from Diana's office, thanking her for documenting what happened. The video included a brief statement from Diana herself. "I want to thank everyone who supported me during this incident," Diana said to the camera. She was in her office now, dressed professionally, looking every bit the federal executive she was. "But more importantly, I want to acknowledge that what happened to me happens to countless people every day. The only difference is that I had the platform and position to ensure accountability. Most people don't. I hope this incident serves as a reminder that we must treat every person with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or what we assume about them, because you never know who someone really is. And more importantly, it shouldn't matter. Everyone deserves respect." The video went viral again, 12 million more views. And across the country, in airline training centers and corporate offices, the message was clear. Assumptions are dangerous. Prejudice has consequences. And silence in the face of injustice is no longer an option. This case reminds us that no one should be judged by their appearance. Justice, when it comes, is complete and irreversible. Did you notice the signs that something was wrong throughout the narrative? Share your theories in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of poetic justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave your like if this story inspired you, and share it with someone who believes that hidden power is the best plot twist.